Hi, I'm Rob Ellis with RE Realty Partners. I'm sitting here with Mike Gallagher of Mike Gallagher Home Loans. How you doing today, Mike?
Doing great, thank you.
Good, good. You know, Mike and I have been talking, we always talk about the real estate market, but we've really been talking about the two things that are the biggest challenges in today's real estate market as far as the consumer is concerned. And that's inventory or lack thereof and interest rates, right?
Right.
Everybody knows this. It's all across the media, obviously, but just wanted to talk about a couple of things and the benefits of not waiting and sitting on the sideline for interest rates to do something. Okay, so those sitting on the sideline who just want to see where rates go, the only thing they're going to experience is three things. Rates can go up, they can stay the same, or they can go down.
Right.
Right? Basic math. It's the only three things they can do. So I wanted to kind of talk about the risks of each one of those scenarios. So let's go first with rates going up.
Right.
Okay. I mean, aside from the obvious reasons that you're going to be paying more, you know, at some point you're not going to qualify.
Sure.
Right. So it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not a good thing anywhere, anywhere.
Any way you slice an increase in rates in the future isn't necessarily going to help the home buyer. I mean, the only scenario that I could imagine is that if rates get to a point where you knock out so many home buyers that there's actually less competition, but we're really not seeing that as a likely outcome. Of the three outcomes of where rates are headed in the next 12 months, the likelihood of an increase in mortgage rates is probably slim.
Yeah. I did a little research and I went back in time until I found the year where interest rates are similar to what they are now, and that was 1970. So in 1970, rates were about 7.3%. Okay, let's say I was in 1970, I was a potential home buyer, and I decided to wait for rates to go down. Well, what happened? Rates started climbing and climbing and climbing. They did for years until they peaked in 1981 at just under 17%. Then they started coming back down. Didn't get back to that 7.3 until 1992. So if you decided to wait, and that was the reason,
Right.
you would have been out of the market for 22 years, paying your landlord's mortgage and not building equity.
Sure.
I mean,
So if you're in the camp of believing that more rate hikes are inevitable or even likely, and that mortgage rates could continue to rise, then yeah, I mean, if you're of that belief, I think making a move now obviously makes sense. You're not chasing the tiger by the tail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, well, that's that scenario. Let's talk about if just rates stay the same. I mean, the most glaring problem with that is you're losing time in
Right.
the market and you're not building equity. In fact, time is kind of the underlying subject of all three of these scenarios. You're always going to lose time if you're
Right.
not buying now. I mean, it's
Right.
just right. So rates stay the same. You just start losing time on day one.
So if if you're a believer in home appreciation over the next 12, 24, 36 months, then yeah, you're losing time. You're losing not only building principal through just making your monthly mortgage payment, but you're also losing appreciation. And even if it's a small, I mean, depending upon the markets, nationwide, most economists and most companies that are kind of forecasting appreciation based on inventory are all projecting somewhere between 3, 4, 5% in 2024. In 2023, it has also been a pretty big year, 5 to 7% depending upon the market. So even if rates maintain kind of where they are now, you're right. You're losing that time value of money through just appreciation, even if it's modest.
Yeah, and you can tack on rent, and you can
And that's the other part of it. Certainly, if you're renting, that kind of weighs on on the side where making a move now might be a little more beneficial. just because you can't necessarily control your rent to some degree, depending upon your lease situation.
Got it.
So,
There was one thing I want to go back to as far as rates going up that I didn't mention, which is probably the most important thing. In that 22 years between 1970 and 1992, real estate values quadrupled.
right.
So, I mean, that's kind of the most important point, maybe. I don't know, maybe it's the time thing, but still, there's crazy numbers.
Right. And so, I'm a believer in, if you're making a financial decision to buy or not to buy, I think that, I think the important points to kind of focus on is, your employment situation. Not necessarily where rates are headed, because I think, as you're pointing out, regardless of whether they're going up, staying the same, coming down, you're kind of fighting time.
So let's talk about if rates go down. Okay, so you've achieved what you set out to achieve. Rates have gone down. What happens?
Yeah. So, and a lot will depend upon, how much rates come down and how much appreciation you've lost by waiting. And so, and that's the scenario we actually think is a higher likelihood of occurring over the next 24 months, is that we're going to see mortgage rates come down as the economy starts to cool, as inflation starts to cool. We're going to see some relief with mortgage rates. But that's it seems like waiting is the smart thing to do under that scenario. But again, you lose that appreciation.
And let's talk about and time.
That's right. And so the longer it takes, the more appreciation that you've lost because of that time value.
I've always likened the real estate market or said that it has kind of a hydrological quality to it. And as the need is always going to be there, right? I mean, will always need to buy homes at some point in some scenario.
Right.
In the market we're in now, as fewer and fewer buyers are getting into homes, those needs aren't going away. That group, that pool of buyers is growing and growing and growing. And the hydrological part I'm talking about is it's just like water against a dam and the dam breaks.
Right.
So once they start coming down and they start seeing improvements, the market is going to get flooded. We're going to see multiple offers, people competing, more buyers competing for fewer homes. It's inevitable. So if you get in the game now, then if rates do go down, that's great. You can refi into that new rate. But if you don't, you're going to miss out on that, and you're going to be competing against everybody and their mother.
And again, I think that's the most likely scenario that we're going to see in the next 12 to 24 months is rates are going to come down, and folks that are just maybe on the fence in general will come into the market, and then you have the people that are right on the bubble that are active buyers, but they're priced out because of current rates are literally keeping them out. Their debt to income ratio is just a little too high, and all they need is maybe 0.5% or 0.75% in rate for them to get back into the market.
And in the grand scheme of things, that's not a whole lot.
We could easily see a 1% reduction in mortgage rates, if not more, in the next 12 months.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a very unique market, as everybody knows, but one of the reasons is inventory is so tight that it's a seller's market, but there's fewer buyers out there shopping. So it's kind of both. It's a buyer's and a seller's market. If interest rates go down, we're going to go right back to a seller's market.
Right.
And that's going to drive prices up, and it's going to increase competition.
That's right. And the important thing to note, I know we're talking about a lot of different points here, but a lot of my clients will go back to the 2008, 2009 scenario, and we're in a lot different situation than we were back then. With regards to inventory, the new construction was kind of off the chart, 2007, 2008. It led to a flood of inventory. And then you had, kind of an unprecedented number of short sales and foreclosures. So you had just a lot of inventory on the market. We have a much different situation now. New construction is nowhere close to keeping pace with household formation. So we don't have that inventory glut that we had back in 2008, 2009. And so just a little break in rate is, you're right, it's going to spark demand. If we were going to see any kind of a significant correction in pricing of real estate, we would have seen it already, because we're peaking on mortgage rates, most likely. And we should have seen, we should have seen a bigger hit if it was going to come.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, talking to the people who I trust, like you, as far as knowledge in the market goes, I've been told many times that the bottom is past a year ago.
right.
The bottom of the market, and it's going up. But one more thing to keep in mind about interest rates is my definition of an artificially low interest rate is anywhere under 5%. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you kind of go back through history, how many years or markets where we had sub 4%, it's a handful in the last 80 years.
Yeah, and it's been really done a disservice to, I think, the Fed, keeping interest rates low, in the sense that the general public has this perception now that interest rates should be at 3% or 4%, because
Right.
it went sub 5 back in like 2009, and then it held strong until 2022, right? I mean, it didn't go
For
back up.
such a long period of time, we had those extremely historical low rates.
Yeah, and it's just not realistic.
Well, it's not. It's not realistic going forward, and that also plays into the inventory situation, because you have a situation where folks, might have a 3.25 rate. We're considering maybe making a move, but they can't really justify it because of their low rate, and so that's one less house that's going to be on the market.
Yeah.
So.
I just think that, excuse me, again, that perception that interest rates should be that low is just prevalent right now, and it's like, it just shouldn't be the case. It's a shame.
Well,
but,
it's one piece of the puzzle. It's one piece of the equation that folks will kind of get fixated on. We don't want to make a move. We're not going to do anything until we get the interest rate that, my next door neighbor got, or the guy I work with, or whatever. When really it's, what are you really trying to achieve? If it's, creating equity, if it's, getting into a place that, could, potentially be your dream home or whatever, I would let the interest rate be the stumbling block.
Yeah.
Unless you can't qualify. That's another story. And that obviously is, it can be a deal killer for folks. But if you can qualify, I'm a huge believer that it is no time to be waiting.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to another point, kind of real estate 101, where just what the benefits of home ownership are. And I just jotted down some notes here.
Yeah.
A long-term investment, we all know that. Historically, it's been a solid long-term investment, right? I think everybody knows that. Equity building, as you make your mortgage payments, you build equity in your home, which is a super valuable asset.
Sure.
Probably the biggest asset that you'll ever have in your life.
Right.
Right? Stability and control is super important, just for your peace of mind and the way you act as a father or a partner. Having that stability and control is really important. Homeownership provides that, especially over your living space, and allowing personalization and a sense of permanence.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Which is a solid thing.
And because most mortgages are 30-year fixed, you're fixing that payment for as long as you're going to be in that house, most likely.
So you're safe from interest rates going up, and if they go down, you can refi into it.
And you're kind of safe from, inflation, because inflation, is not going to impact your mortgage payment. Your mortgage payment is fixed. So it's a nice safety net
Yeah.
to know that that payment isn't going to change.
I have two more things. Just tax benefits. Again,
Sure.
everybody knows this, but let's just go over it real quickly. There are tax advantages to home ownership, such as deductions for mortgage and property taxes.
Correct.
Right? So that's a huge
That's an
benefit.
And so, to do that comparison, which we do for our clients that are renting, is we'll do a rent versus own and just show, based on current rent and a hypothetical purchase, including the mortgage interest tax deduction, including the property tax deduction, how they kind of compare apples and apples. And that's a pretty easy comparison, a pretty easy analysis that we can do for our clients. And a lot of times they're shocked because of that deduction for both mortgage interest and property tax, and a portion of that payment is going towards principal. When you kind of get to the bottom line, apples and apples, it's usually a lot closer than most people realize.
Yeah, and I tell clients or potential clients that this is a type of service that Mike and I provide for free. We do it all the time. It's never too early to know your numbers. Even if you don't think you can qualify,
Right.
give Mike a call and look at that rent versus buy. And even if it's not the right time for you now, you'll know what you need to do to make it the right time in the future.
Right. And, if you don't believe in 4% appreciation or 5% appreciation, let's run an analysis at 1% or 2%. At least you'll have the numbers. And we'll do the same thing for kind of the cost of waiting, where, we can forecast. Let's just assume that mortgage rates drop by 2% in the next 24 months. We can kind of do an analysis and show, okay, even with a 1 or 2% appreciation in home values, how does that look over time? And is there really a benefit to waiting, or is there a cost to waiting? And we do that for our clients every day.
Yeah.
That are kind of, on the fence for one reason or another. And it kind of helps, when you see the numbers, kind of helps your decision making.
I made one more note, and albeit it's basic, but it's important to remember is it's a fantastic hedge against inflation. As real estate can act as a hedge against inflation as property values rise concurrent with the cost of living.
Right.
So
that property value is your hedge against inflation, and then you have a fixed rate mortgage that isn't increasing. And so that's kind of the benefit there, of course. Assuming that you're in a 30-year fixed mortgage, regardless of where inflation goes, that's going to take your property value with it, but it's not going to change your mortgage payment.
Yeah. So everything we've talked about has that underlying commonality of time, of losing time.
That's right.
So all of these things, it's good information, whatever, but getting focused on interest rates is not as important as getting focused on time and losing out on that.
I would agree. And, for someone that is really kind of grappling with this and the timing, I would say, focus on what you believe is going to impact appreciation. If you're someone that has data that believes that we are truly headed for a market crash, well, then that's a different conversation. I'm not necessarily in that camp because we're reading data from 10 plus economists every day, and we're studying inventory, and we're studying inventory trends in the future, and we're studying household formation, which impacts the supply-demand dynamic, and we just don't see any evidence that we're headed into any kind of a price correction with real estate. Now, there could be markets, there could be neighborhoods that maybe had a big run up, and for whatever reason, the neighborhood isn't doing so well just from, maybe other development going on around it. That's kind of a different story. But in general, I would say, most zip codes, most counties across the U.S. are going to experience appreciation in the next few years for sure.
Yeah, and I think something that's important to keep in mind is that when the consumer hears news about the real estate market, 90%, if not more of the time, it's going to be national numbers that they're hearing.
Sure, of
They're
course.
not hearing about California. I mean, it's its own market. So if there's any, if there, I mean, you just said it's like you think interest rates are going to, or prices are going to go up across the board. That's great, but it's going to be even more intense here.
I would agree. And we also, we do collect data that is county specific, which impacts the appreciation rates. And it's fairly easy to predict because building permit activity is public record. So, we subscribe to a service that they kind of track building permit activity county by county throughout the nation. And then the household formation, it's a little trickier, but they can track population trends. And so, you have this dynamic where you've got new households, coming into the market that need to either, go rent a place or purchase. That's putting pressure on inventory. And then we have the new construction numbers, and we can kind of see, okay, are they out of balance? And in most markets, they're still way out of balance.
Yeah. Well, this is all good stuff. I think just on that note, keep in mind that as far as local numbers go and trends in the real estate market, unless you're kind of in the business and you're living it every day, like I said, you're going to be hearing national data for the most part. So Mike and I are both just a wealth of information about all things real estate. And so if you have any questions, you want to talk about anything about it, give us a call. I'll leave our numbers at the end. And I appreciate your time, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If anyone, is looking for local data and just wants a little more information on everything that we talked about regarding our forecast for interest rates and our forecast for appreciation, I will, there's no charge to share all that information.
Yeah, excellent. Well, appreciate your time.
Yep.
And we hope to talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Okay, thanks. For more information on the Santa Clara County real estate market, call Mike Gallagher at 408-930-6064 or Rob Ellis at 408-858-5222.